So as you all know, the final exam is tomorrow. I will send out an email later today explaining logistics, but I already announced this many times. I will hand it out on noon tomorrow morning, somewhere between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and it will be due one day later. Yes. And it's open book, open roads, but obviously you can't discuss it with anyone except if you have questions you can ask me. Okay. So that will be the end of the exam, but the lab which many of you have yet to turn in, as I said, I can accept all the way through next week. Okay? The earlier you turn it in, the easier it is because I have a hard deadline to turn in the grades early week after next, so that I cannot change. So if you can hand it in somewhere towards the latter part of next week, that would be good for the TA to finish grading and we can hand out the grades. Okay? I'll send a note about that as well. So, in the last lecture, I was initially thinking maybe I'll do a review of all of the topics we studied, but I figured that might be a bit boring. So I instead decided to spend the lecture on a topic that I was actually going to skip initially. It's a topic in the book which is distributed security. The reason I was going to skip it is now there is a graduate level course on security which goes through all of those concepts in a lot more detail. But I figured that it's worth spending our last lecture so that you get a little bit of sense of what this topic is in case you don't end up taking this other class which is on security. So that's what I'm going to do. And so we will talk a little bit about basic concepts in security, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about applications that are important from a distributed systems perspective that might be somewhat of interest to us in this class. Okay, so first let's start with some basics. So basics, I'm going to talk a little bit about authentication, encryption and things like that, which are basic concepts in security. Authentication is basically the problem of one party convincing the other party that they are who they claim to be. Okay, there is an example that basically you get a phone call from someone claiming to be your bank and asks you for some information. How do you know that that's the bank as opposed to somebody masquerading as your bank? Okay. Same is true if you go to a computing system and claim to be someone. How is the system to know that you are that user and not someone else? And that's really the problem of authentication. Okay, so there are many techniques that you can use to address authentication. I'm going to go through some of them quickly. You should be familiar with all of them. Okay, so clearly just telling someone that you are someone doesn't help. Okay, so you can, if Alice wants to authenticate herself to Bob and just says, I am Alice, Bob doesn't know whether to trust that or not, because there could be a third entity, an intruder, Trudy, who can send the same message. Hey, here Alice and Bob are computers. Security world, they like to have personal names assigned to entities rather than saying to computers. So intruder Trudy can also send the same message, and Bob doesn't know whether the message actually came from Alice. So there are ways to address this. You can use IP address to do a better authentication, saying if a packet came from some machine claiming that it's from Alice, can you use the IP address to claim that the packet actually came from that machine, so it must be from Alice. That doesn't quite work because it is very easy to do what is called IP spoofing, where when you send a network packet, you can change the source address on the packet to whatever IP address you want to be. So when the packet reaches the other machine, it actually appears to have come from a different machine than the one it was sent from. So if you can spoof IP addresses, which is quite easy if you just actually change some code in the OS kernel, so that when the packet goes out, it simply replaces the IP address. Instead of the IP address of that machine, you put whatever random address you want. Then this is going to defeat IP address based authentication. That's obviously not going to work. And the technique that most authentication protocols are going to use is, if you claim to be Alice, you have to then supply a password. So that is how you log into a system. You give your username, system prompts you for a password saying prove it that you are whoever you claim to be. And then if you supply the right password, then the system lets you log in. Okay, so you may then, the assumption is the password is only known to you. So if you supply that password, it must be you, not someone else. Okay, that's the basic idea. That is at the heart of most of these authentication protocols, but there are some problems even with that, as we will see. So for example, if Alice sends a message packet or a message to Bob saying, I'm Alice, here is my password. Okay, if you use a protocol like Telnet or FTP to do this, what happens is all of the text in your packet goes unencrypted. Okay, so your username is going in plain text unencrypted, your password is going in plain text and unencrypted. So although you have proved to Bob or your computing system that you are Alice and you have provided a password, what will happen if you send your username password unencrypted is an intruder can actually intercept the network packet while it is in transit and learn your username and password. And once your username and password is learned by a third party, they can then use it to access the system. Okay? So protocols like Telnet, FTP are not secure in that sense because none of the communication is actually encrypted between the two systems. So your username, password, everything goes in plain text and that doesn't work. Okay? So the side thing you should keep in mind is not to use unsecure protocols like Telnet, which is why most, I don't know if any of you know what Telnet is first of all, but it is the predecessor of what you now use using SSH and so on, which are more secure version. Telnet was just a way to remote logging. You connect it to a machine and you log it, exactly what SSH does, but SSH is more secure. Okay, so you shouldn't send username passwords in plain text. So what could you do? You have to encrypt packets so that an intruder cannot figure out what is being said, so that your passwords are not compromised. So here is an example way to do this. Okay, so we will assume that Alice and Bob use what is called a symmetric key. Okay, symmetric key is a secret key that is only known to Alice and Bob, and they can use this key to encrypt the message. Okay, we haven't talked about encryption yet, I'm going to come to that, but you know the general idea. Okay, encryption allows you to take some message, apply a key and a function, and it gives you a scrambled or an encrypted version of the message. Okay, and then you can use the same key to recover the original message or decrypt the message. Okay, so only Alice and Bob know the secure key. So here is a new authentication protocol where Alice sends a message to Bob saying, I am Alice, which is encrypted. Okay, so Bob can now decrypt this message, and what you see in the message is I am Alice. Okay? Now since this key is only known to Alice and Bob, okay, Bob can assume that if you decrypt the message and you get a username saying Alice in there, only Alice could have sent that message. Okay, because the key is only known to the two of them. Okay, so this is one way you can authenticate yourself, okay, using encryption. However, even this protocol, which is now using encryption, is problematic because it is vulnerable to a kind of attack. Okay, for example, if this encrypted packet, saying, so the encrypted packet is simply this message, I am Alice, encrypted in some form. If the encrypted packet is intercepted by an intruder, okay, the intruder can simply hand over that packet at some later point in time to Bob, and Bob will believe that that packet came from Alice. Okay? This is what is called as a replay attack. Okay? You are simply storing. So the intruder cannot generate, the intruder doesn't know the key, they cannot generate such a message. However, they can intercept an encrypted packet and then hand it to Bob at a later time, exactly this encrypted string saying I'm Alice and claim to be Alice. Okay, and Bob will have no way to distinguish whether it actually came from Alice or not. Okay. So this is referred to as a replay attack. That can also happen. So even when you use encryption, you have to be careful because you can be vulnerable to things like replay attacks and so on. Okay, so what could we do? So you shouldn't send your passwords in plain text. You shouldn't, even if you said, so this could also be extended to say I am Alice and here is my password incidentally. Here you are only saying I am Alice, but assume that username and password are both encrypted and sent over. Okay? But somebody's just intercepted those encrypted versions of the packets and then is just simply replaying them at a later time. Now you're stuck. So what could you do? Yes. Okay, add a nonce or a sequence number, so we'll talk about that next. as to what that is. So essentially, if you want to make your protocol really secure, you shouldn't reuse passwords at all. Okay? The basic idea is either the password should never be sent, or you should use a different password each time. Okay? And by password, I'm using the word password in sort of a very broad way. What you're using to authenticate should never be reused at some later point in time. So that even if the intruder intercepts those packets, encrypted packets, simply presenting them at a later time doesn't allow them to authenticate to Bob. That's the basic idea. Okay, so you can use a one-time password which is never reused again, or you're going to use something called a nonce, which is exactly the same idea. Okay? So we are going to use a sequence of passwords, and this is how it's going to work. So we are going to use what is called a nonce. A nonce is once in a lifetime integer. Okay, so which means that every time you say I want to generate an integer, you can generate a random number, but next time or any subsequent time you generate another random number, you'll never repeat it. Okay, think of a sequence of integers you generate, but they never repeat. Okay, so we'll call such a number integer as a nonce. Okay, it's a once in a lifetime integer which is never going to repeat over the lifetime of this application. Okay, so the encryption protocol now is Alice is going to send a message to Bob saying I am Alice. This is unencrypted, doesn't matter. Okay? Bob is going to generate a once in a lifetime integer called n. Okay, this is our nonce. So you'll say here's an integer. Okay, so that's going to go to Alice. Alice is then going to take that nonce and encrypt it with the session key that is only known to Alice and Bob. Okay, we still assume that there is a symmetric key that's only known to these two parties. So you are going to encrypt that nonce and send it back. So here is the encrypted version of your integer. Okay? Bob is going to then decrypt that message, and if that message, the decrypted message has the original nonce, Bob knows that it's Alice. Okay? Now in this case, if you actually intercept, if an intruder intercepts the encrypted version, okay, and later on tries to replay the steps, claim to be Alice, okay, and then Bob is going to send a new nonce at that point. That nonce is not going to match the old one. So say representing the encrypted version of the nonce is not going to help you authenticate anymore. Okay, so this technique is not going to have the replay attack problem, because every time you basically repeat this authentication, a new nonce will be generated. So the encrypted message that goes back to prove that you are Alice will be different. Okay, so in other words, you are using a different password. Here the password is the encrypted version of the nonce every time to authenticate yourself. Is that clear? Okay. So this is also called challenge response protocols. Yeah, there's a, so if you actually work in a company and subsequently in your life career, you will see that many of them use firewalls and so on. And if you are outside and you want to access some computers inside the firewall, you may be given some protocol, and many of them will use what is called a challenge. Okay, so you basically say I am a user X. Okay, system will say here is a challenge, and the challenge is going to be a nonce saying prove to me that you are who you are. So you will get an integer back, and you are supposed to send back an encrypted version of that integer. Okay, that is how you use the session key. Many times the session key may be actually encoded in a device. Okay, you may get a tiny device where you punch the key and it gives you back an integer, or it displays an integer. That is what you actually give it back. So you don't need to carry the key with you. It's actually in the device that is given to you. Okay. So here is encryption protocol that is actually secure. Okay, now the security of this protocol of course depends on the ability to generate nonces that are never going to repeat at all. Okay, so even if it's 10 years later or 50 years later, if you go and authenticate, you will always get a nonce that is never repeated. So you have to ensure that the integer is long enough. Remember that in our computing representation, integer is a fixed bit representation. So if you have a 32-bit integer, you only have so many integers you can generate before you run out of values. Okay? So if you use 32-bit integer, you better be sure that the lifetime of the application is such that you will never run out of a new 32-bit integer that has never been used again. Or you can use a 64-bit integer. Whatever you pick, there is still a limited number of integers you can generate because of the fixed bit representation of a nonce inside a computing system. Okay, so these are all practical issues you have to deal with. Any questions here? So another way to do this, rather than using nonces, is it does use nonce as well, but another way to do this without having to use symmetric keys or use what is called public key cryptography. Okay? This is a very popular technique as well. And what it uses is, rather than having a shared key, a symmetric key between Alice and Bob, you are going to use something else called a public and a private key. So in this case, public key cryptography says if you are a user A, okay, you can generate a pair of keys. Okay, one is called your public key, another is called your private key, okay, which are used for encryption and decryption. Okay, so you can take any message, and the assumption is that the private key is going to be only known to you. The public key is published. Okay, everyone in the world can get your public key. You actually give it to whoever wants to get your public key. Okay. And if you want to send an encrypted message, what you are going to do is you are going to take a private key and use it to encrypt the message. Okay, so this is going to give you an encrypted version of the message and prime. Okay. Then you can send that message to anyone. And since the public key is known, they can actually take your public key and take that message, and then that will give you back in. Okay, so these are, so if you take the public key and put M and get M prime, you can use the private key to extract M back, or if you use the private key to encode M, you can use the public key to get it back. Okay, there in that way, just as in a symmetric key, you can take a value, you can apply the symmetric key to it, you get an encrypted version, and you can apply it back, you get the original message back. The same is true here. Okay, all encryption algorithms are going to do the same thing. They will have a key, okay, they will scramble the message, give you an encrypted version of a message, and then if you apply a key again, you'll get the original back. Here, rather than using one key to encrypt and decrypt, we are using two keys. Okay, one is called a public key, another one is called a private key. Okay. There are many techniques to generate public and private keys. One is called RSA, which you may have heard of, okay, but I'm not going to go into RSA here. Okay, but just keep that in mind that RSA is an example of a public key cryptography. If you use SSH and so on, you know if you ever generated a key of your own, you know there's a public key and a private key that you use in SSH. Okay, same concept is true here. Okay, so if you assume you have a public and private key, okay, which here is called the encryption key and the decryption key. Okay, EA is the encryption key of Alice, DA is the decryption key of Alice. Okay. And so all public key cryptography have this value with this property rather. You take N and apply the encryption key and then the decryption key you get back N, and this is, you can apply them in either order. That's exactly what I said there. You can take N and first apply D of A, that will give you N prime, and then if you apply EA to N prime, it will give you back N. Okay, so in that sense they can do the same thing. Now with that, here is how this authentication protocol is going to work. Alice can send a message to Bob saying, I'm Alice. Okay. Bob is going to say, here is a once in a lifetime nonce, prove to be your Alice. Alice is going to take her private key, which is only known to her, and encrypt that nonce and send it back. Okay. So what Bob can simply do is take Alice's public key, which is known. Okay, so Alice publishes a public key. So Bob knows the public key, and so all Bob has to do is take Alice's public key, apply it to the encrypted version of the nonce, and if you can recover the nonce from it, then you know that this came from Alice. Only Alice has access to a private key. Okay, so Bob can verify and ask can anyone else for that matter, because the public is known that this could have only come from Alice. Okay, so this is a authentication protocol, with challenge response authentication protocol that uses public key cryptography. Any questions on this? Is this clear? I just said, okay. So public key and private key, although I'm not going to go into any encryption techniques, I'm going to briefly mention in a minute or two how public key cryptography can work. So any encryption algorithm. So let's say you want to encrypt some message, okay, of arbitrary length. What you do is you take that message and you chop it up into blocks, B1, B2, B3. So because it's an arbitrary string, you will chop it up into blocks, and you will take each block, okay, and you are going to encrypt it. Let's say you take your encryption key and you encrypt it. So this will give you a B prime. This will apply the encryption function and give you B2 prime.